One.
Hi everyone, my name's Katie. Thank you for joining us today. I'm a development coordinator at Iridescent, and I met many of you at the airport and welcomed you to San Francisco. And with us today is Carla Rocha, the business development manager at Iridescent. So we're really happy that you're interested in going above and beyond your duties as a master educator through learning more about fundraising. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Carla and we'll get started.
All right, so we know that as master educators, you often have certain fundraising needs to run Technovation in your communities. So some of these needs might include hosting a regional pitch event, finding space for program meetings, securing prizes for the regional pitch event, and then materials, and this can also include your technology needs for the program.
So in today's presentation, we're going to walk you through the fundraising process. Starting out with stakeholder mapping, going over how to prospect research, outreach to different contacts through email, setting up a meeting and building a relationship, and then also what support we'll offer you from Iridescent and what we'll expect from you.
Attention please. Because Richard call.
A stakeholder is someone who, as a person or business, who has an interest in your program and might be impacted by your project. So to figure out who your stakeholders are, you need to ask yourself, who would use Technovation? Who would use the product or service that you're offering the community? Who has the ability to make decisions about your program? Who has the ability to give or take away resources from the program? And you want to identify all the potential stakeholders by putting them into 3 different buckets. And I know that many of you walked through this exercise with Amy when you identified contacts within your own personal network. So we're going to take this a step further today. So you want to make sure that you're brainstorming all the different possible organizations and people within the private sector, public sector, and civil society. So this could include corporations and businesses, individual business leaders, banks, business associations, all the way down from ministers and advisors in the government to international bodies like the World Bank and the UN, USAID. And then finally, in civil society, who are the different media outlets, churches, schools, NGOs, or international NGOs that you might be able to work with or perhaps partner with or even obtain funding from. And then from there, you would want to figure out and prioritize who you need to spend the most time and effort on. And you would do this through mapping them out on an influence matrix. So in the upper right-hand corner, these would be the people that you want to spend the most time on. These are the people who have the most influence and the most interest in Technovation. So these are the organizations that you'd want to pursue for funding. In the upper left-hand corner, you would have individuals, businesses, or organizations who have a lot of power but don't have a lot of interest. And so they're the ones who you need to be able to convince and tell a compelling story about why they should support Technovation, because they could come on board with you. In the lower right-hand corner, you would have organizations that have a lot of interest but don't have a lot of influence. So these could be your potential partners, other nonprofits that you could band together with to pursue funding or partner for programming implementation. And then in the lower left-hand corner, you have organizations or businesses who you don't want to spend a lot of time on because they don't have a lot of interest or influence. And they should be the last on your list to pursue. So now that you've taken that step in mapping out different organizations or people, you need to be able to figure out the process of researching them. So Carla's going to discuss with you what prospect research is and what you do after you've identified all of the major contacts within your network.
So, prospect research is pretty much the first step in the fundraising process and probably the most important. It's going to tell you what organizations and companies align with Technovation, and it will help you decide where to focus your efforts and your time. So, prospect research is a technique that fundraisers use to better understand potential donors, corporations' backgrounds, their giving histories, the size of the organization, and their philanthropic motivations. So, this information is going to really help you evaluate their ability to give and how likely they would be to give to your organization. Because just because they have a very large foundation associated with their company doesn't mean that their giving interests are going to align with Technovation. So you don't want to waste your time trying to build a relationship with a corporation or foundation if their giving priorities do not match with your program, or the likelihood is extremely low for getting funding, meaning they might not be very large or they just don't have a strategy for giving back. So if you don't know where to begin, you can do a Google search. Try searching for K-12 STEM education grants in your country through Google News to try and find some press releases. You can sign up for Google alerts for STEM funding in your region. You can look at websites of similar NGOs in your country and which companies they partner with. This is a great strategy by looking at similar organizations to Technovation, find out which companies are funding them, because then you know that those companies are already aligned with what Technovation is doing overall. So once you find a specific company to research, you need to gather the following information. You're going to want to look at the company information first. What's their revenue, who their competitors are, and their strategic priorities. You're also going to want to look at their foundation and grants. So what's their average award size? When are their deadlines? And who are their previous grantees? Do they just fund the same organizations year after year, or do they have this strategy of funding newer prospects? You also want to see if they have a corporate social responsibility strategy. Do they have one? What are their priorities? Do they have an individual whose job is CSR? Because this would be a great person to reach out to. You also want to take a look at their employee engagement and diversity and inclusion efforts. So do they have training programs in place for their employees? Do they engage their employees as volunteers? If they have a very strong culture of giving back and employee skills-based volunteering, this company or organization would be a really great fit for approaching them to sponsor Technovation. So once you've done all of this research, you want to find the right person. So generally, you want to look for people who are in corporate social responsibility, human resources, or their community involvement manager, or in communication roles. And it's very important that they probably want to hold a mid-level position. Because if you contact someone that's either the president or CEO, they probably won't respond to your email. Or if it's someone who's very entry level, they might not have decision-making power. So they might not be the best person to initially approach. So people who are directors, managers, or head of a certain department are probably the best people to contact within the company, because you will have a better response rate and they can also be a champion for Technovation. So now Katie's going to go through email outreach, which is following your prospect research.
So once you've identified that individual who you think is a good fit, you want to determine whether or not how warm or cold your relationship is with them. So if you've already been introduced to them before, you've met before, or you have a prior relationship, they'd be a warm contact. A cold contact is someone who you've never spoken with. They're a complete stranger. You don't have any prior relationship with them before. So I'm going to share my screen really quick and show you what an example of an email that you could send to a contact would look like. So in the beginning, you definitely want to lead with something warm. This is just a sample. You would want to customize this to reflect the context in which you know them. So you would want to say something like, it was wonderful getting a chance to meet you. Thank you for that introduction, so-and-so. I really enjoyed hearing you speak on the panel about X, Y, and Z. And if it's a cold email, in this section you would perhaps bring up an initiative that their company has launched, or some news that you saw they were featured in, to make them interested in learning more about what Technovation is. You don't want to just launch into what Technovation is at the very beginning, because they would get bored. So in this section, This is generally what we might send to a potential funder or someone who's interested in Technovation. So you would just briefly describe what Technovation is, and you can also customize this to fit your country, your region, put in information about the girls who have completed your program. So, for example, right here, 2 of our Technovation teams have the opportunity to present to President Obama. That's where you could put in something about how several of your finalists came to San Francisco, or you could put in examples of apps that your girls have completed. So, and you could also do this down here below and expand upon the regional aspect of Technovation within your country. And you want to close out by leaving a very warm ending and offering the opportunity to connect in person to discuss potential collaboration opportunities and attach further information for them to look over. And you want to keep this overall to about 100 to 200 words. This one's a little bit lengthy because we just showed you some options for customizing it, but you can leave or take out information, add information as you see fit, but this would be the general format of sending an email out. All right, Carla, let's take this back up with setting up a meeting and relationship building.
All right, so you did your prospect research, you sent the cold or warm email, and now, great, you have a meeting with one of your prospects. So now what do? So you need to make sure that you come prepared. We need to know the facts about Technovation, for example, how many girls we have served globally and specific impact data for your region, so you can demonstrate the power and benefits of Technovation in your community. So during the meeting, you will want to share this Technovation background, our mission, vision, and values. You will want to also include local poverty facts, examples of apps, and student success stories. So make sure that you keep the conversation focused on the potential funder. You're going to want to ask questions about their needs, challenges, their strategic goals, their giving strategy, and examples of successful projects, and how they can engage employees. It's very important to demonstrate the benefits to the company by getting their employees and possibly funding involved in Technovation. So your goal for this meeting is to secure another meeting. If this is the first conversation you're having, you don't want to push too hard for funding. In fact, don't ask them for funding at all at this stage. Your goal, again, is to just get that second meeting. If the meeting goes well, they may ask you for further information they can pass along to their colleagues and introduce you to more contacts at the company. So at the end of the meeting, make sure you clearly state the agreed upon next steps, whether it's to share some additional information via email, connect with another person in the organization, or just to send a follow-up meeting invite. Also be sure to offer to engage their employees as mentors and do a lunch and learn session to teach their employees about voluntary opportunities through Technovation. So once you have left the meeting, be sure to send a follow-up thanking them along with additional information such as our About Technovation booklet. If they seem unresponsive after your first follow-up email, try touching back within 1 to 2 weeks. If they are still unresponsive, stay engaged with your contact through providing updates every 1 to 2 months. So an example of, it can be very discouraging if you continue to follow up with a company at a great meeting and then they just silence, right? Well, let me share a success story about how perseverance really can benefit and come through with funding. So Tara, our CEO, had sent updates every few months to the head of a foundation at a major software company and never heard anything. After years of doing this, the company randomly emailed us to say that we received a $20,000 grant in celebration of their anniversary. It turns out that the head of the foundation had been passing along our emails to the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and the CEO of that company. Moral of the story, don't give up and be brave.
Another example of how we built a relationship from start to finish is with another major corporation here in the Bay Area. So oftentimes when we host events, we'll invite personnel in the HR department, in the corporate social responsibility department to attend the event. So in this case, it was World Pitch. And we invited the HR personnel from this major corporation to attend. And afterwards, she was so in love and so interested with Technovation that she wanted to set up a meeting with our staff to learn about how they could engage their employees as mentors. And then she took it a step further by actually connecting us with their foundation staff. So now, actually today, I have a meeting with their foundation staff to discuss how they might be able to support us in the Bay Area and expand our operations here. So in your case, this could be a kickoff launch event in your community. So when you're hosting a kickoff launch event, you could invite different personnel from their employee engagement department, their CSR department, invite them to come, learn more about Technovation, and then continue to nurture that relationship through setting up another meeting to ask about future ways that you could collaborate. And that could grow into something that's really special.
All right, so this slide highlights a few key points to keep in mind as you're embarking on your fundraising initiatives. So you really want to lead with a personal hook in emails. This will help catch the prospect's interest and help them relate to you through your story. You also want to come prepared with research and facts. You need to listen more than you talk. This will help you gather as much information as possible about your prospect that may not be available through their website or come up in your prospect research. Hearing personally from the prospect what their interests are and their metrics of success will better inform your strategy and follow-up pitch. You also need to be very clear the benefits to the funder. And again, be sure to follow up with thanking them for their time and with some supplemental information. You really want to try and avoid being too pushy with your outreach and follow-ups. I know this might sound like contradicting information, but you really have to have the right balance so that you don't end up, irritating the prospect. I know it's sometimes frustrating to not hear back, but it's still important to do that follow-up, but in a very respectful manner. You don't want to spam their email. Over-communication can be just as damaging. And lastly, don't be afraid to ask for help or guidance from the Technovation team. We're here to support you. We want you to be successful. We want to reach our overarching goal of deepening the impact of Technovation and expanding the program in your respective countries.
So along those lines, here are different ways that we're going to be supporting you on our end from the fund development side. So we'll be providing you with outreach materials, which I'll show you here on Google Drive. And I believe Amy has given you access to this.
Yeah, I also linked to it in the chat.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
So feel free to explore this, but this booklet right here is the about Technovation information booklet that I usually send in an email or when they ask for additional information. And it's also really great text for you to use in your email outreach as well. I also tend to use this PDF, which if there's a company who's really interested in engaging their employees as mentors, this gives them a really great overview of how we train mentors and how they're going to benefit from volunteering through our program. And then there's also different recruitment tools in here as well for recruiting mentors, different flyers for both students and mentors. So really a whole host of tools that you can use here in this Google Drive, both in your outreach to funders, mentors, and students. We'll also have access to a fundraising toolkit, which has tips. It goes into greater detail from this conversation. It has that sample outreach email, which I showed you during the presentation. And we're also going to give you a generic proposal that you can pull text from if you need to create a proposal to send to a funder. We'll also give you access to our Slack channel, which Carla and I will be on. We'll host bi-monthly fund development webinars. So this webinar was meant to be very introductory and just give you an overview of the fundraising landscape and how to just start the process. But if there are certain topics that you really want to go into depth with, we can certainly arrange those webinars. And then we'll also provide you with support virtually through email and such. On your end, we ask that, of course, you recruit girls and mentors to the program, that you help with hosting regional pitch events. If you want to fundraise, we'd love for you to send a team and mentor to the World Summit. And then we really need you to collect and send back data. This is important for you when you're going to potential funders and for us on the organizational side of things, so that we can keep gathering that data and making sure that it's up to date. So with that being said, Amy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I just wanted to comment on a question I saw in the chat from one of our RAs named Angie. Thanks, Angie. She asked, can we know which entities you have reached in the U.S.? And so maybe we could do the same in our countries. So I think the question there is, can people know which companies Technovation operates with? And, if so or if not, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Madhvi. Sorry, I was on mute for most part. So I can answer that question for Angie. So we would love to share that list, but when we are doing a lot of prospect research and working with these companies, there's a lot of non-disclosure paths, we can't discuss with other companies or outside that we are in conversation with them. So it becomes a little tricky, not for us, but from their legal perspective to share out that list. But I completely understand where you're coming from. So I guess another workaround for this is, if you think that there are companies in your particular countries or your regions who might be interested and you have reached out to them or you're planning to reach out to them, then you can let us know, these are the 4 or 5 companies we're hoping to reach out. Is any one of that in your network already? And then we would say, yes, we're talking to XYZ, this is where we are at. So that makes us give out that information in a more legally controlled way, because we just can't at this point share out that list because of the legal constraints. So we are more than happy to share that information if you can send us a list of companies that are interested on your end. Does that make sense, Angie? Would that be helpful, or if you would have other suggestions?
And this is Carla. I just want to jump in on that point that Madhvi made. We also are trying to avoid making duplicate asks to companies who are supporting the larger nonprofit that runs Technovation, which is Iridescent.
I'd say I have 2 comments. This is Amy. If you guys, as master educators, could let me know in your monthly reports if you have particular countries that you're interested in reaching out to companies, that would be great. And maybe, if it's before your monthly report is due, if you could just send an email and CC Carla and Katie or one of them. If you guys could type your emails in the chat, that would be great. Just so that we have the larger picture of the kinds of companies you guys are interested in partnering or working with. And also, some of you might even have questions like, how do I start the process of looking for a company in my vicinity that might be appropriate? So I'm wondering if Katie or Carla has any tips on that initial search.
Sure, I think that we mentioned it briefly earlier on in the conversation today, and a great way to do that is by starting with setting up Google alerts for within your country, using keywords like K through 12 STEM education grants, or employee CSR initiatives in Kenya, CSR initiatives in Peru. I think that could be a really great way to start, is by using Google alerts and also through Google News, because when you search on Google News, a lot of the press releases from these they want to publicize what they're doing. So these press releases will come through in Google News, and then you can see that, oh, Intel funded this nonprofit, and it looks like they might have another grant opening in a few months. You can also look at websites of similar nonprofits in your community, whether they're just education broadly, or they're girls' education, or STEM education. You can look at similar nonprofits. You might have several different nonprofit partners that you already work with or know of, and you can look on their websites, because they'll probably give recognition to their corporate sponsors, and if they're being funded by them, there's a good chance they would be interested in funding you as well. And also researching the companies where your mentors are volunteering from, because they're great they're a great first step into the company. You could also search on LinkedIn for people whose job title is related to corporate social responsibility or community involvement, communications even. Those job titles within your city or within your region could lead you to some really interesting companies whose foundations might be willing to support Technovation. So those are some of the ways that you could just get that initial start if you don't know where to begin.
We also got a question from Angie. The outreach materials look great. Thank you. Can we have the raw versions so we can translate it to Spanish? The master educator for Spain is creating a doc for fundraising in Spanish.
Yes, we can send that. So we'll put in a request and we can send you the material. So Angie, are you referring to the outreach materials for mentors, or are you referring to like the booklet? Which exact promotional materials are you referring to?
I think it might be across the board, but I'll let Angie answer.
I think Yvette just commented saying for all outreach materials.
Cool. Yeah, so we can send you the Google document where you have the actual content, and you guys can like translate it. My only request to you is like some of this has been like approved by our like marketing team. So, and I know there might be some instances where you might have to make like some adjustments based on like, whatever the national sensitivities are or the way you want to word it. But I would just request if you're making any edits to the language before doing that, if you can send that to Amy and we can get an approval from our marketing team, that would be awesome. But if you want to translate it as it is, sure, go ahead and do that. But for any edits, we would have to get that cleared from our communications and marketing team.
Nice, thanks. I have one thing to add, if it may not have been mentioned, and this is just an example from real life that I got the other day. I received like a cold email from a student who wanted Technovation to sponsor his coding club, and it was an interesting email, and I read it, and he had specific asks because he, like everybody else, is not just asking for money, but for donations in kind. And I think that when you're approaching someone who you might not know very well yet, who you don't have a relationship with, it helps to ask for really small donations in kind to start out with and not just money. Because, when I first read that, my reaction was, well, we're struggling to get money ourselves. So, giving money is probably out of the question. But then I noticed he had other smaller donation in kind requests, and that kind of like softened the conversation and brought it back to the realm of reality for me. So I suggest that you guys do the same things too. Like if you need specific things, whether it be additional mentors, time is easy to donate in some cases, and things that don't cost so much, or even space. That's a really great place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to have a range of different asks so that you can perhaps have mentors, facility space or use, a financial ask. It's good to have different options in your arsenal of asks that you want to give to the potential funder.
Yeah. Any
other
questions? Jinx.
Thank you guys so much for joining our fundraising webinar. And as Katie mentioned, we're here to support you. So if you do have any questions or any additional needs, just please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and hi, this is Maggie again. I just also want to add that we are also looking at this as like a community effort, something like, because like, we have you on the ground who we serve, who we think as more like, our eyes and ears in the ground. So you will also come across a lot of questions on the ground. We might not have ready answers for it. So we would love to hear if you're running into any challenges, if you're like, if there are particular trends that you are seeing, if there are any lessons that you're learning. It would be super helpful if you can share that with the rest of the community, with us and with the other master educators as well, so that everybody can benefit from it. So it's not that we have all the answers, but we are together in this and sharing our experiences. And we would just love for you to do the same so that we can broaden the pool of knowledge that we have here in making our asks.
There are a few more little questions that trickled in from Yvette and Angie. They are also, when we fundraise, should we ask for Iridescent or should we use a local nonprofit in our countries? I'm asking for tax purposes.
So for most part, it is advisable for you to get the funding through the local nonprofit on the ground, just because it will be a lot of legal challenges to get Iridescent involved because we have to get our teams involved. And if anything, like, if Iridescent signs that particular contract through which you're getting the money or like the grant, then there needs to be like an admin fees that needs to be added because Iridescent is involved. And then it might, I know for countries, especially for Brazil and Mexico, it makes it more difficult because of the conversion, their money gets less. So like there are a lot of issues that I realized happens when Iridescent comes in to sign the local grant for you to pick up the money. I would suggest and strongly encourage if you can do that through a local nonprofit. And you can get like, if that particular sponsor or entity needs a letter stating that, your nonprofit XYZ will be implementing Technovation on behalf of Iridescent, we have a separate partnerships agreement that I can send your way if you have any of these grants coming up. That partnership agreement clarifies that you would be implementing this on behalf of Iridescent, and then you are the direct partner in terms of receiving the money and using it, which covers a lot of our liability issues as well. So I can send out that partnership agreement as well, and that might cover a lot of your bases. But if you have very country-specific legal requirements, we can look into that as well. Is that helpful? Can I provide like additional information? And yeah, we'll send out the partnership agreement to the master educators and anybody else who needs it, and then we can take it from there. Is there anything else? Any questions around that, or anything else that Carla Kaduni have mentioned? We can address that as well.
I don't see any more questions. Yvette, I sent a link about the marketing material. I sent an email out recently with all the updates for master educators, and that link was in there. And I also put it in the chat. So if you scroll up through the chat here, you'll also see the link to outreach materials. Oh, the editable. When we have that, we will share it.
Yeah, we can share it with you by early next week. I don't think we have it, but our communication person is on vacation, so we can share it with you by sometime early next week. Would that be okay? Or is it okay? Sure, we'll do that.
Sounds good, everyone. Thanks for your time and your good questions.
Thank you. And on behalf of Carl and I both, I think we're both excited to get a chance to work with you more on fundraising initiatives. And thank you so much for being so committed to girls and technology. And we're really grateful for all that you're doing on the ground in your local communities.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.